What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the PFF NFL show. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Dalton Wasserman, back here with you guys this morning to preview another division for the NFL this upcoming season. Today, we've got the AFC South. Very interesting division. Dalton, I think that we're probably going to agree at how we see the very top of this division. But honestly, all of the three other spots, I'm extremely curious to hear whether or not you think that these teams can compete to a playoff level. Excited to hear what the people say in the chat as well. But buddy, how you doing? You say you didn't get great sleep last night. So, I mean, do we need to do something to pump you up here? Like, how you feeling right now?
No, I don't think so, man. I'll run off enough adrenaline knowing that college football week 1 starts tomorrow and that marathon's going to run through Monday, and then we're only 8 days away from NFL action, man. I think that's probably what it is. It's kind of that like night before Christmas thing, right, when you just can't sleep and you're trying to figure out just like, okay, like I just need tomorrow to get here so I can get back to some sort of normalcy. Although I think for us, normalcy isn't really a thing during football season, but
it's true.
I think it's got to be in part that just ready to go. Obviously, we had week 0 of college, and now we got all the games coming. We're about to have 5 straight days of football.
I was talking to our good friend, the do-it-all man at PFF, Dave Solfaro, who's one of the biggest college football fans that I could possibly name. I was just chatting with him yesterday. I was like, hey, you got any big plans for the weekend? He said, oh, just straight up vibes, baby. And he asked, hey, what are you doing? This is what I'm doing. Waking up, getting a little run in. Like I'm gonna like try to feel good about myself. I'm gonna get like a little run in the morning. I'm gonna go to Publix and get the biggest buffalo chicken tender sub they could possibly make, and then I'm gonna sit on the couch from noon until well after midnight watching everything that there is to college football. We're gonna get into the NFL in a second, but Dalton, as the college football guy, one of the college football guys, didn't mean to disparage Max Chadwick there. Is there one game that you're really looking forward to this week or this weekend, specifically on Saturday? Just man. Like one game that you cannot wait to see, whether it's a big result, a player performance, whatever. Just one game you got for us to give us a little appetizer here.
I'll go with your game, and that's Miami going to the Swamp to play the Gators. I think it's to be honest, it might not be like the biggest game as far as the rankings go, but I think it's the most fascinating game when you're talking about you got two coaches that could be on the hot seat, especially the loser if that game not getting off to a great start. You know, obviously Miami's got high expectations and the Gators have been struggling lately, and I didn't know if you had watched the preview yet and saw who I picked, so maybe I just won't tell you so you're not mad at me the rest of this episode.
I haven't seen it, and you saying it like that at the end means I might have to give you a little attitude no matter what here for this show. Or
maybe I'm just messing with you. Maybe it was Max that didn't. You know, could be. Maybe
you are an excellent. Just an excellent, like, I don't know, like host, like somebody who's like teasing the show, like it gets you roped in. Maybe that's just what you're doing here. And if you are, well done, because I'm listening the second that we get done with this show here. Before we dig into the AFC South, I want you guys to picture something. Picture a future where your child has the financial freedom to pursue all of their dreams without any barriers. Well, with a UGMA account by Fabric from Gerber Life, it's a real possibility because of the simple and impactful actions that you guys as parents can take today. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make an easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Now, UGMA, that stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kids can't invest while they are minors, a UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow as they grow. Fabric has partnered with Gerber Life, a name that is trusted by families like yours for over 50 years. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric today to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future at meetfabric.com/NFL. That is meetfabric.com/NFL, meetfabric.com/NFL. No contribution limits on this one. Multiple tax advantages. SIPC insured up to $500,000. No commission, just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. All portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services are provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contributions are required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Let's dig into it, Dalton. I think that the format that we had over the last 2 shows, if you guys missed it, you should go see it. That was a good way to start this off. Let's give our total record predictions for each team in the division, talk about a little, treetops, and then we'll dig into each team individually, I think, over the next hour. So How do you have the AFC South finishing here in 2024?
So I've got the consensus favorite Houston Texans winning the division with a 12-5 record. The addition of Stephon Diggs and just how loaded they are now on defense, I think they're clearly the favorites in this division and should win it. I've got the Jaguars at 10-7 and bouncing back to make the playoffs after a year out of it. Got Indianapolis at 7-10, and then the Titans at 4-13. Now I acknowledge the Titans probably have a little more talent than that. I could see them something closer to 5 or 6 wins. I think they're going to be really, really competitive in a lot of games. Just the way when I was putting together and going through all the schedules and just kind of working things the way I wanted it to, the win total ended up a little lower, so I'm not too set on that 4-win total for Tennessee. They could be closer to the Colts, but that's certainly the order that I have it in right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar to you. I figured that we were going to be lockstep in how we were talking about this division at the very top, and that is the case. I also have the Texans at the top of this division. In fact, I have them with the same record as you, 12-5. I think that's a really good number for them to shoot for, that double-digit win total, and I think just being the top team in the division has to be what they're going for. It's got to be, on the whiteboard, if you will. This is our goal for the season. Let's win the division. Let's host a playoff game. Let's see what happens after that, because it's a really strong roster with some of the additions that you mentioned. I got the Jags at 9-8. I don't have them making the playoffs. I think we can get into that in a few minutes when we really start to talk about the Jags. I'll expand upon that. Colts right behind them at 8-9. I unfortunately think this division, especially in the middle, is kind of going to cannibalize itself, if you will. Like, I think that the Jags and the Colts are just going to beat each other up too much within their schedules to really allow one of them to just take a big leap and get into the playoffs. And then I've got the Tennessee Titans sort of close to where you are. I have them getting an extra win, 5-12. I don't know, that might be hating on the Titans, but man, I got some worries on them in the trenches. But hey, let's start with the Houston Texans. Let's start with the team that we think is going to really capture this division. Where do you have their 2024-2025 season ending? And then we'll get into some offensive MVP before we get into some breakout players and some favorite rookies for this team.
So I have them as one of the final 4 teams standing. I think they're going to make. I think they're going to make the AFC title game. I really like the improvements they've made on their defense, adding guys like Daniil Hunter and Azeez Al-Shire, adding Stephon Diggs on offense and Joe Mixon. Obviously, I mean, offensively they're as loaded as any team in the league, right? And you've got a front 3 at receiver like Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs. But the MVP has to be the guy that makes it all go, the guy that turned their franchise around. It's CJ Stroud. I mean, certain teams, you try to get away from the quarterback and you try to find, okay, what's the other reason? Who's the guy that's underappreciated, this and that? But Stroud was just incredible last year, right? And you're talking about a guy who put up the 3rd best overall grade by a rookie quarterback in PFF history. The only 2 guys better were Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson. I mean, what Stroud did, that's the 13th best overall grade in football. But if you take out, it's really weighted down by 3 bad games, 2 against the Ravens and 1 against the Jets. And actually the Jets game, he got hurt in that game. You take out those 3 games, he played like a top 5 quarterback. And he very well could be for the entire season this year. Another year of experience, maybe a little bit better pass protection. Now you had Diggs as a 5th legitimate weapon now when you talk about the 3 receivers plus Dalton Schultz plus Joe Mixon. I mean, they are just absolutely loaded. That set of 11 guys that they're going to put out there with 3 receivers out there is as good as any in football, right? And I know Stephon Diggs' second half of last year wasn't great in Buffalo. He started spreading the ball around more, didn't have a 100-yard game after, I think, week 5 or 6. But you add him in with those 2 guys. We saw what Nico Collins could do as number 1. We saw what Tank Dell could do before he got hurt. This is a loaded crew, but Stroud makes it go. Stroud and the decision making. Honestly, there's certain times I watch it, I'm like, man, that looks a lot like Peyton Manning. I'm like, that's just mentally, physically, and honestly, for like a taller, kind of thinner guy, he's got a rifle for an arm man. I mean, he makes 65 yards look easy. I just keep going back to that throw he made the first play of that last game against the Colts, and I'm like, man, that's a cannon for an arm. He's got everything. He turned on the improvisation in that Georgia game, that last game of his college career, and then it just never went away because that was the one thing he really didn't have the rest of his Ohio State career. CJ Stroud makes this whole thing go. He's the engine of this team, and he's going to lead them to a division title.
Yeah, look, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. The Peyton Manning comp is obviously high, but it's hard to not get so excited about what CJ Stroud is. And, I remember when I was scouting CJ Stroud, he started as a true sophomore at Ohio State, and then obviously he started as a true junior as well before he declared, because he couldn't have declared after that sophomore season. I was worried about him. I'm not going to lie. I was worried about how he played under pressure when you have Ohio State, which is basically like 5-star university at this point. You got 5-star receivers, you got a 5-star offensive line, you got a 5-star running back to hand the ball off to. And when things are going well, especially before this now souped up version of the Big Ten, like it was basically Ohio State and Michigan, and that was kind of it in that conference. So most of Ohio State's schedule was easy opponents that they were just more talented than, no matter what. And when Stroud had to play under pressure, especially as a sophomore and most of his junior season, he struggled. Really low passing grades below 50%. And that Georgia game, he had a passing grade, man, under pressure, had to be close to it had to be close to an 80 grade, and maybe it was something in the 70s, but whatever it was extremely impressive how he played against Georgia under pressure. And that was the final game that we saw from him in his college career. And as a draft evaluator, I'm kind of like, what do I do with this? Because you mentioned huge arm, really talented quarterback overall, the best pure passer that we had in that really talented quarterback class, even with, Bryce Young in there. And some people, myself included, was like, yeah, take Bryce Young number 1 overall. The intangibles are too great, whatever. I would have told you that CJ Stroud is the best pure passer, prolific passer in the class. But how he played under pressure was such a worry to me. And I'm like, if the Georgia game is how he's going to hit the ground running in the NFL, I'm in. I'm all in on CJ Stroud. He's going to be fantastic. But I had my reservations because it was such a small sample size in one game. It ended up being that was exactly the case. And he was a monster his rookie season because he truly did hit the ground running. I'm so excited to watch him even take another step up this year. With, you mentioned, an incredible receiver room with Nico Collins and a healthy Tank Dell, and now adding Stephon Diggs to it. You've got veterans in the backfield like Joe Mixon, who's going to lead that group as both a rusher and a receiver as well. So it's an extremely talented group, and CJ has to be my pick for MVP as well, if I didn't say that off the top, because of the high expectations that we have from him. I mean, it's not just team MVP stuff. I mean, for as good as this offense can be with Bobby Slowick back as the offensive coordinator, you got to think about this Texans team could be good enough where CJ Stroud's getting just overall MVP votes if the season goes the way a lot of people think that it can't. So what about defensive MVP? Let's switch to the other side of the ball. Who do you guys the defensive MVP this year?
Some good candidates here, I think, especially in their pass rush. You think about Will Anderson, you think about Daniil Hunter. That's a dynamic duo. And I really thought about picking one of those guys, but I could not ignore the breakout we saw in the second half of last year from Derek Stingley Jr. Man, I mean, now he's ascended into being one of the best corners in football. And to me, the difference in their secondary and the difference in them, just their secondary emerging as a real unit last year, the last 8 games that he played, week 13 through the divisional round game, an 89.4 coverage grade. Trevor, that was the best by an outside corner in the NFL. The only 2 guys that were ahead of him were slot corners, Michael Carter and Mike Hilton. So you're really talking about a guy who, when you get into that argument, now to me, Sauce Gardner is clearly the best corner in football. But when you get into that argument of who's right behind him second, I think Derek Stingley is either in that argument or he's going to be that guy by the end of this year. He's showing us now what he showed us his freshman year at LSU, when as a true freshman he was the best corner in the country during LSU's national title run with Joe Burrow. Then he had injuries. Then he had some time that, wasn't playing a whole lot even early on with the Texans. Last year's rookie year, he was hurt for some of the year and then tried to work his way back. Now he's one of the best corners in football, and he can do anything. He played man, plays zone in D'Amico Ryan's system. It just is one of those guys. We've seen it this preseason as well with the interception against, I believe actually, was it 2 interceptions or just 1 against Daniel Jones and the Giants? Might have been. I think it was 1, but it should have been 2. Yeah, it might have been 1 pick and 2 pass breakups. I think it was something like that. But he looks fantastic. When Derek Stingley's healthy, he's got a very good argument as the second best corner in football. I'm going with him on the back end as their defensive MVP.
Listen, as somebody who had Derek Stingley Jr. as overall player number 1 on his 2022 NFL Draft Big Board, I absolutely love what you're saying. And I could not agree with you more here, Dalton. I also think that he is going to be the defensive MVP of this team. And we've got a lot of people who are in the chat as well saying, like, man, there's a lot of different players to choose from, a lot of impactful players here from this team. But I think a lot of it will start with how well Derek Stingley Jr. can truly be that lockdown corner. You mentioned a little bit of his struggles early on in his NFL career. 49.2 coverage grade in 2022. an 85.3 coverage grade in 2023. And this preseason, because of that game that you mentioned against the Giants, it's got a lot of weight here. On just 28 snaps, 95.9 preseason game. It just goes to show you how well he is playing. And when you turn on the tape to look at it, man, the tape absolutely matches the high PFF grade. I mean, he is anticipating. He is getting to where the ball is going to be. At times, like too early. Like at times he's almost a little shocked with like how well he is reading the play. And I think that all of that is just going to turn into some major plays for them in their defense. And to me, he has to be the defensive MVP. Walt's asking in the chat, yeah, but who's playing cornerback opposite? We'll get there. Walt. I promise. That's coming up in a couple of minutes here. But let's talk about a breakout player. Who do you guys a breakout player here for this team, Dalton?
Look, when we did the North yesterday, we had an FAU legend for the Cincinnati Bengals, right? And I have another one for the Houston Texans. We're going to look at their linebacker position, go with Azeez Al-Shaair, reuniting with DeMeco Ryans from his days in San Francisco. This guy's been a really good run defender since he's been in the league. And 2 years ago, in Ryans' last year as a defensive coordinator for the 49ers, Al-Shaair had his highest career overall grade at 74.4. This guy, for certain, is going to be a good run defender, no question. The question will be in coverage. He could raise this game a little bit by being better in coverage, and now the onus is really going to be on him not only to break out, but to be a really important leader for this team. Christian Harris, who was projected to be their other starting linebacker, is out till at least week 5 with an injury. So now Al-Shaair really has to take on that role as the middle linebacker, captain of the front seven, right? Directing traffic, stopping the run, dropping back in coverage. But I think he can do it. I think his familiarity in this system, his familiarity with DeMeco Ryans is a big asset for this team. They lost Blake Cashman, who had a breakout year last year, but I think they could have a linebacker have a second straight breakout year in Houston.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. The addition of him and reuniting him with DeMeco Ryans, I think is I say underrated. I think a lot of people have kind of like mentioned it at this point, but when you talk about linebackers in the grand scheme of things, like we've got people in the chat, understandably so, talking about, Will Anderson Jr., and we just talked about Derek Stingley Jr. Like there's a lot of other guys who I think their names just carry a little bit more notoriety, and Azeez Al-Shaair and what he could be in the middle of that defense, especially the chemistry that he has with DeMeco Ryans and the defense that he wants to run from his time in San Francisco, like that is huge. And I think that's going to be an underrated part of why this defense could be one of the better ones in the NFL. For my breakout player, I'm going to go with an area of the team that if I have any question marks about it, it's the offensive line, particularly the interior offensive line, right? I think that Laramie Tunsil is one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. They've got Titus Howard, who's playing better at right tackle as well. But the interior offensive line for this group was not great last year. And I'm looking at Kenyon Green, and I'd love to see a bounce back year from Kenyon Green. They drafted him number 15 overall in the 2022 NFL draft, and to me, that was rich. That was a rich pick. I did not think that Kenyon Green was there yet. I didn't think he was a top 15 type of an offensive lineman, especially an interior offensive lineman. Last year as a rookie, well, actually, this was not his rookie year. Last year, 39.3 overall grade on the season. Not great, Dalton. Objectively, not great. And he played 823 snaps, so it's not like it was skewed for like one bad game. I mean, it just was a struggle of a season for him overall. This preseason, he does look better. 84.7 overall grade on 56 snaps. Again, it's a little bit smaller of a sample size, but I am hoping for a breakout bounce back year from Kenyon Green. To me, they really need him on one of the areas of the team that is pivotal. You were talking yesterday about how much offensive line really matters, and obviously I agree with you. Kenyon Green's got to kind of get it figured out here. What about the team's best rookie?
I think it's the guy who's going to play the most, their second-round pick, Kamari Lassiter. You mentioned before,
somebody
in the chat mentioned before about, well, who's going to play across from Stingley? And they brought in some veterans on one-year deals. I believe they just cut C.J. Henderson. They brought in Jeff Okudah. They drafted Lassiter. Who's the guy? Who's it going to be? Which one of these former high draft picks, is going to be the guy across from Stingley that's not getting targeted 120 times a year because you can't throw at Stingley, right? I think it's Kamari Lassiter, an 87.2 coverage grade at Georgia last season. He was arguably just straight up their best cover man last year, and that was the 8th best mark in the Power 5, right? So I didn't go back and realize like how shut down he was at Georgia. I knew he was good, but like he was lights out. I believe he only gave up 4 plays all season of 15 plus yards, and those 4 plays accounted for like 60% of the total yards he gave up all season. Outside of those 4 plays, he was just lights out for the Bulldogs, man. I think he's going to come in here. He should be the starter right off rip as a second-round pick over some other veteran guys who struggled throughout their career. I think those other guys are depth guys. I think they drafted Lassiter with the idea that he is that guy across from Stingley, and he's going to play the most out of all their rookies. So I think he's certainly the candidate for best rookie.
I agree with you completely. I think that Kamari Lassiter is the guy, and beyond just even some good play that we have seen from him in the preseason, I think it's what we've heard from practice. The practice reports of people who are covering this team, and like DeMeco Ryans himself. I was watching a video where he's just praising the competitiveness of Kamari Lassiter. You talk about the background of being able to play for that Georgia Bulldogs defense. I mean, it's just ingrained in these dudes. Being champions, playing as best as you possibly can, giving it your all. I mean, the work ethic, the pride that he plays with, that competitiveness, again, from Kamari Lassiter is something that we saw on tape consistently while he was at Georgia. It's what's allowed him to ascend to that potential starting CB role there. And I think that he really can be a good corner. And it's tough to be a good cornerback as a rookie in the NFL. So I think that Lassiter is in for a big year because of the mentality. I think that's the part. When you look at corners and the guys that struggle as their rookies, oftentimes it's not like a lack of athleticism. I guess sometimes it could be, but it often comes from just being overwhelmed and not being prepared mentally. I'm not worried about that when it comes to Kamari Lassiter. It does not seem like DeMeco Ryans is either. So I also have him as the best rookie on this team. We didn't really mention Will Anderson, which I feel like is a slight to Will Anderson. I mean, we should. He's in for a massive breakout season. I think that he is going to be a fantastic player as well. Also, Sarah in the chat correctly correcting me that my intuition was correct. That grade that I was talking about with Kenyon Green, the 39.3 overall grade for him as a rookie, was indeed him as a rookie. It wasn't last year. He missed all of last year with an injury, unfortunately. So I'm excited to see him back and healthy. But I was like, I thought this was his rookie year, but I didn't put the date down here. Thank you, Sarah, for calling me out there and making sure that we got that on the record and correct. Let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars here. You've got them at 10-7, making the playoffs. I have them at 9-8. Missing the playoffs. Where do you have this team going? What's the final spot here for the Jags? Are you all in on this team? Is this team making a deep run, or is it just sort of a playoff berth and that's it? What do you think about Jacksonville? And then talk about who you think is their offensive MVP as well.
So I am just in on them making the playoffs. I do think they bow out in the wild card round. I just think there's other teams in the AFC in that playoff mix that are better than them in the trenches. I worry about their offensive line, and I definitely see where they could miss the playoffs. Absolutely. This offensive line, they were the 3rd lowest graded unit in the league last year. It's a big problem in the run and pass games, right? And, you've got talented guys behind them, right? Trevor Lawrence is great, and he's my offensive MVP. Honestly, I think he kind of has to be. And you could probably argue for Travis Etienne as well, led the league in forced missed tackles last year. You got a bunch of, you don't have that number one guy, we don't think, at least right now, on the outside, but there's a lot of talent on the outside to work with, but they're going to live and die with Trevor Lawrence. And I think the thing with Lawrence now, he's become this gunslinger, and you see the high end a lot, tied for 3rd in the league last year during the regular season in big-time throws. But he also had the 2nd most turnover-worthy plays behind Sam Howell. So there's probably an element behind his offensive line, and with not necessarily a true top-flight, let's say, Justin Jefferson type of receiver, where Lawrence is trying to do too much at times, and the turnover-worthy plays can come in spurts. It's a difficult balance for him, because we saw him figure it out after just god-awful and unfortunate rookie season right under Urban Meyer, where just everything was a mess. And Doug Peterson came back in and he rebuilt his throwing mechanics, rebuilt his footwork as the season was going, and then he looked like an elite guy in that playoff year in 2022, right? By the end of it, we were like, wow, this is like a top 6 quarterback. And then last year, obviously, again, to me, a big part of this is the offensive line. They have to get better. We're going to talk about them all season. I'm a Lawrence optimist. I'll be honest with you. I think he very well could be. It probably is to me. I would have him at 9th or 10th. I think he's a top 10 guy. I think he's wicked talented. He's got as good an arm as anybody in the league. He's mobile when he's healthy, but got to be able to stay healthy, and not even so much his fault. This offensive line has to play better. They brought in Mitch Morse, but the other 4 guys are really going to be the same. That's the big X factor for me. But either way, they're a team, they're going to live and die with their quarterback. It's Trevor Lawrence or it's nothing, honestly. And he does have to clean up the ball security, especially under pressure. Last year, I believe it was a 46.6 passing grade under pressure. Have to be better than that. Obviously, You're not going to be as good under pressure as you are in a clean pocket, but the solution really is I need clean pockets more often. I need guys like Anton Harrison to get better. I need the interior to be healthy. I need Mitch Morse to help us at center. There's a lot of variables up front to this, and I need the running game to be better, and that's on the offensive line too, because I don't really see Travis Etienne as the problem there, right? They've got a boatload of talent at the skill positions. They just need the line to come together in front of them, but they will live and die with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and when it comes to playing under pressure, you don't always need the quarterback who can do the spectacular, right? The Mahomes, the Caleb Williams, like the crazy stuff like that. What you need most of the time is a quarterback who will raise your floor under pressure, right? I mean, the floor is not going to fall out from underneath you when you get pressured. That's what you need. It's an area where I think that Lawrence absolutely can get better as an extremely talented player. I think in this business, we're all very obsessed, and even if you're not in this business, even if you just like sports and you're talking with your friends, we're obsessed with being first. Like people want to be first, right? They want to call oh, I saw this team coming before anybody else. I picked them to go to this place before anybody else did. I am at peace now knowing that I'm just not going to be first on the Jags. At this point, I just need to see it to believe it with the Trevor Lawrence era. And I'm not trying to say that it's not possible. I absolutely think that it is. But I just have come to grips with I'm not going to be the guy who's going to be like, yep, I was first on the Jaguars. Give me the Jags. I'm taking the Jags. They're going to get – I've got to see it at this point. So that's where I am with this team. I think they are fully capable of doing it. They've just got to turn the corners in some other way. You mentioned the offensive line. We're going to talk about the defensive line a little bit in a second when I get to my potential defensive MVP. But both trenches are just in a place where – yeah, we can all name the names. Like Mitch Morse, I think is a great addition. I still like Brandon Sheriff. I think that Anton Harrison's playing really well. Again, I'll get to him more in a second. I think Cam Robinson can be, serviceable as an offensive tackle. You got Ezra Cleveland as well. You got Trayvon Walker on the other side. You've got some good guys on the interior. There's names to know in both trenches for the Jags. It's just got to all come together. And if somebody else wants to call them as winning the division or getting to the AFC Championship game or something like that, hey, at the end of the season, I'll give you a little golf clap. I'll give you a hat tip. I'll say, hey, you called it. It's not going to be me this year. It's not going to be me making that call. Again, I have them 9-8. I have them barely missing out on the playoffs because of some of those inconsistencies that I just straight up just need to see get better before I can really have trust in this team. My defensive MVP, to sort of transition here, is actually Trayvon Walker. Now, I'm not saying that Trayvon Walker is going to be the best defensive player on this team. It's a little bit like the conversations that we had over the last couple of days. I think that Joshua Hines-Allen is going to be fantastic yet again for this team. I think that Tyson Campbell is going to be fantastic. I think that a lot of the young guys that they have, especially at the second level, at the linebacker level, they're all going to play better. Devin Lloyd specifically. But to me, so much of how good the Jags defense can be and maybe how good they can be as a team overall hangs on the former number one overall pick in Trayvon Walker, because even though he racked up a lot of sacks last year, he has yet to have a season where he has been a double-digit pass rush win rate type of defensive end. And when you look at last year, you can see it on the screen there. Hines-Allen had an 89.1 pass rush grade. There was not another single defensive lineman on the team who recorded a pass rush grade above 60. 60! It's got to be way better overall for this team, and it's got to start with their former number one overall pick in Walker. He had the sacks last year, but sacks are one of those stats that can sometimes lie to you. And we need that pass rush win percentage and total pressure percentage for Walker to be up a lot higher. He's got to have his best year yet. What about you? Who you got as your defensive MVP for this team?
I'm actually going with a guy that you mentioned that I think is the most valuable person, is the guy who, he other than Trevor Lawrence, if Josh Hines-Allen, if something were to happen to him and he got hurt, that's panic mode. I don't actually know what we could do. And to add on to that, look, Hines-Allen, top 8 in the league last year in pass rush grade, true pass rush grade, pressure, sacks, pass rush win rate, everything. Absolutely everything. Top 8 pass rusher, elite pass rusher in this league. And the team still finished 28th in the league in pass rush grade. It almost makes no sense, because usually if you have one of those guys, you at least find your way into the top half. It's kind of like how the Raiders have been with Max Crosby. There's some other teams who have like one great pass rusher, and it's like, okay, that's good enough to at least get. But that is how important he is to their pass rush. I don't actually know what they would do without him, because honestly, I get what you're saying with Walker. I'm a little worried about him because these numbers that he's putting up as far as win rates and pass rush grades and things like that, they're not that different than he put up at Georgia, right? And I know at Georgia it's a little bit different position. He was playing that 3-4 defensive end. You're not in like the best pass rush position to do that. We talked about that with like Will McDonald too the other day at Iowa State. Certain guys just aren't put in that wide 9 position where they can just pin their ears back and rush the passer. But if there's not significant sudden improvement from a guy like Walker or somebody else on that defensive line, then again, Hines Allen has to carry the entire thing. And can he do it? Well, sort of, but it kind of works a little bit like the offensive line where it's just like if you have one good player and 4 terrible ones, they just can't carry it. They can't carry the whole crew like that by him. Even if he has 20 sacks this year, you just can't. It's only 20 when the best teams in the league usually are in the 50s in sacks. Who's coming up with the rest of them, right? And you're not gonna zero blitz every play either. You're not doing that, especially if you're Jacksonville. Like you don't have the coverage ability. You don't like it's not just what they do. So I think Hines Allen's the second most valuable player on this entire team behind Trevor Lawrence. If something were to happen to him, I'd have serious concerns about their defense.
Hey, I've won a lot of Madden games by just zero blitzing every single play. So, don't disparage the tried and true strategy here. Don't take that away from me.
You're playing people who don't know how to beat it. That's all you're doing.
You're playing okay, here we go. Yeah, competition level, whatever. Tell it to the trophy case, buddy. All right, who do you have as your breakout player for this Jags team?
I'm going to stay on defense, and a guy I'm cheating a little bit because it's a guy who kind of had a breakout last year, but I think he could take another step, and that's Devin Lloyd at linebacker. Look, really struggled in his rookie year all the way around, kind of adjusting to the NFL game, and then had a nearly 30-point jump in his overall grade from 48 to 78, and a 90.3 run defense grade that was the 4th best in the NFL, up there with the Fred Warners and the Demario Davises of the world. Devin Lloyd across the board just had a spectacular second season in the league, and I think as athletic as he is, as his instincts have now caught up to the NFL level. He's got a really good partner back there in Foye Oluokun, who leads the league in tackles like every single season when he was at Atlanta, when he was at Jacksonville. Now, these two guys at linebacker are really good, but Lloyd's the more talented. He's got the higher ceiling of the two of them. I think there's a chance we see Devin Lloyd in the Pro Bowl this year. I just think if he makes one more jump all the way around, he could be one of the best linebackers in football. He already proved he could be something close to that last year. I think there's another step coming for him.
Man, I remember watching Devin Lloyd's tape at Utah, and there's so much that I loved about it. And honestly, the most frustrating part about his tape is sometimes he wouldn't play like with his hair. You know how people say like, oh, they're playing with their hair on fire, like the motor's just running at 110%, whatever. Like there were times when he didn't play exactly like that. And I was like, if you did right there, you could have made the play again, as if he didn't make an incredible amount of plays in the backfield at the line of scrimmage, in coverage. He has the potential to be a Pro Bowl linebacker, like you mentioned, and I would love to see him take that next step and really just be a centerpiece and one of the better young linebackers in the NFL this year. That'd be a lot of fun to see his ascension like that. My breakout player, I'm going to go with another young guy. I'm going to go back to the trenches. You talked about how much they really need to get better in the offensive trenches this year. I agree with you. Anton Harrison, their right tackle, is the guy that I want to highlight here. Anton Harrison is another player who I was a pretty big fan of when he was coming out of Oklahoma, and the reason why is because big dude who moved really well. He had a fantastic finesse game for an offensive tackle. I think the footwork was fast. I think he was coordinated, really good pass blocker, but I was worried a little bit about the strength portions of his game, and I think that showed up a little bit early on during his NFL career. Recorded a 54.6 overall grade in 2023, this last year as a rookie. Played over 1,000 snaps, so got a lot of experience there. The main culprit of that bad grade, though, was run blocking, which is the concern that I kind of had of him coming out of Oklahoma. 45.2 overall run blocking grade last season. This preseason and this training camp, by all accounts, it feels like he is a much better player here in his sophomore year in the NFL. 72.4 overall grade this preseason, and he looks stronger with a 69.5 run blocking grade. Again, preseason, smaller sample size. You're not going to get up against the other team's ones every single snap. I understand that. But it looks like he is taking that next step to round out his game better. I already like the potential of what he could be as a pass protector. Jags might really have something here with a good offensive tackle in Anton Harrison, so I'm going to call him as my breakout guy. What about the team's best rookie before we move on to the Indianapolis Colts?
I think I have to go with their first-round pick. I think the two things for me, obviously Brian Thomas Jr. is really, really talented. He's got explosive speed. I thought he was one of 4 or 5 receivers in the draft, along with his LSU teammate Malik Neighbors, that, there's fast guys and there's guys with just that different level of speed, right? You can tell they're that low 4.3 guy. You can see it on the field. You can see it in pads. He's got football speed. He had a 99.9 deep receiving grade last year at LSU, which is as high as it possibly
is. Is that good? Is that good?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It tied with a handful of other guys for the national lead. If you're hitting 99.9 on our scale, there's not a whole lot else to say. You're really good at what you do, but also led the nation in deep touchdowns, second in deep yards behind Roma Dunze, who got, I think, a few more targets and played a couple more games, honestly, when you talk about playoff games and things like that. But I think it's a great fit with Trevor Lawrence when you talk about a guy, and Lawrence had his struggles last year, but he was still 5th in the league in deep passing grade and the most big-time throws on deep balls in the league last year with 31. Trevor Lawrence is a vertical passer, and I really like overall what the Jaguars have done, going and getting Brian Thomas Jr., going and getting Gabe Davis. Now, these aren't going to be high-volume targets, right? You're still going to see Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram get the high volume of targets, and even Travis Etienne too. Those are the guys that are going to move the chains. But we've seen it a couple of times already this preseason, what Brian Thomas can bring to the table, right, with his speed, deep overs, go balls. If he gets a one-on-one in press coverage, Lawrence is going to give him a shot. He's not the most polished route runner yet, but they didn't bring him in here to do that this early. They brought him in here to complement Trevor Lawrence's arm down the field vertically, big shots, 40-plus yards. He can take any play from anywhere to the house. Same thing with Gabe Davis. You've got those two guys on the outside. We've seen Gabe Davis, 98-yard touchdown in Buffalo, right, against Pittsburgh. Brian Thomas doing the same thing with Jaden Daniels last year at LSU, just dropping bombs on opposing defenses, on SEC defenses. I don't remember if he had one on the Gators, but he probably. But it's just such a great combination.
We didn't need that. We didn't need that. We didn't need that.
Don't watch the preview. I'm telling you that. It just.
There it is.
It's a great fit, though. It's the combination of speed and talent and fit. And there's so often where you want to match up your quarterback with guys who just make sense for their skill set, right? The Dolphins and 49ers do it with the yards after catch with Tua and Purdy. There's other teams that want to get downfield. This is what the Jags wanted. They fully embrace, let's let Lawrence use the big arm. Let's get him some big, fast weapons who can come in here and get 60-yard bombs down the field. And let's really stress out safeties and get guys out of the box. It's going to help their run game, too, to have guys like Thomas and Davis in there.
I agree completely. I think that you set the table very well for Brian Thomas Jr. to be the top rookie on this team. Obviously, he's not the only rookie that we have on this team. Jerry Jones, I think, is going to be an interesting player for them. Mason Smith has flashed a little bit this preseason. I like the addition of Jordan Jefferson on the interior defensive line as well. But you've got to kind of pick Brian Thomas Jr. for this award, not only because he was the first-round pick and he's, I believe, the most talented of the group, but also because of what you said. It lines up exactly with what the Jags want to do well. Last year, on passes of 20 or more yards, they had the 9th most total attempts on such passes, the 5th most yards, the most big-time throws, as you mentioned, and the 4th best passing grade. This is not only what the Jags want to do, it is something that Trevor Lawrence is very successful with. So Brian Thomas Jr., I also have as the top rookie here for the Jags. Before we get on to the Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to talk to you about our friends over at DraftKings. Had the appetizer last week, and now, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, it's time to feast, baby. College football is back. Don't miss any of the action and jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook. Full slate of games for week 1, including a matchup that it sounds like Dalton's going to be dead wrong about that's happening in Gainesville, Florida. I'm confident. Of course I'm confident. This is how I talk when I'm confident. DraftKings is the number one place to bet on touchdowns as well. They got the most TD markets offered in TD futures, leads, season specials, all the good stuff. Touchdowns can be scored on the ground, through the air, defensive effort. You guys know every way that a touchdown can be scored. They could also result in a winning bet. This is going to be the best and biggest season of college football with DraftKings to date. Enjoy the ride now all the way through the expanded college football playoffs. Plus, all the newbies can get in on the college spirit as well. Here's something a little extra for you. DraftKings customers, new DraftKings customers, I should say, can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings all college football season. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF for new customers. Get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, 877-8-HOPE-NY, or you can text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problems with gambling at 888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsibilities for responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/FTBALL. Football season is also finally upon us as we're talking here on this show. It's been an interesting offseason, I would say, to say the least. Had some blockbuster trades. Kirk Cousins heading to the Falcons, and then, out of nowhere, they drafted Michael Penix Jr. You got Aaron Rodgers, the excused absences, the unexcused absences. I know Dalton probably doesn't like to hear more drama about the Jets, but it's been a wild offseason. But hey, all jokes aside, this season we will be listening to the new podcast called The Offensive Line with Annie Agar. Annie's an NFL insider. You might know her from her uncomfortable team meetings on social series that she has. The Offensive Line with Annie kicks back with NFL stars, celeb superfans throughout the season to unpack the weekly lines, the odds, spreads, with her usual brand of sharp wit and banter as well that Annie is very well known for. The pod is packed with humor, and it's always a must listen. To keep up with the latest news and NFL culture, follow The Offensive Line on the Wondery app or wherever you guys get your podcasts. You can access bonus episodes as well and listen ad-free now by joining Wondery Plus. That's how you can get on that action and go listen to Annie's show there. All right, let's get into the Indianapolis Colts here. I got them going 8-9, obviously below 500, as it typically is. Means I have them missing the playoffs. What's the record that you got for the Indianapolis Colts? Talk to me about where you see their season going, and then give me an offensive MVP to kick off this conversation, this preview here for this team.
So where I'm at with the Colts is the same spot that you are with the Jaguars. I need to see it to believe it. I have them at 7-10, also missing the playoffs at 7-10, and I just... The Anthony Richardson thing for me is difficult because obviously he got drafted as high as he did because he's a supreme athlete, maybe the best athlete we've ever seen come out of the position, had an unreal combine that we just may never see again, who knows. He's got the arm strength. He's got the feet. He's got all of that stuff. But the accuracy still bothers me, right? And I think at Florida, he wasn't particularly accurate. It's going to be the biggest thing. And there's a lot of things. I know they're kind of tweaking his mechanics right now to try to work with that and work through the shoulder surgery. Had some ups and downs this preseason as well. And I think the one thing that gives me hope is that Shane Steichen's an elite play caller. To me, I would probably make him, he's probably one of the top 5 play callers in the league right now. RPO heavy system, a very, very modern offense, wants balance, wants to go up tempo. Darn near won the division last year with Gardner Minshew playing every week. I have to see it consistently to believe it with Richardson, and I think there's a good supporting cast. You talk about a good offensive line, players like Quentin Nelson and Bernard Ryman and Ryan Kelly, Braden Smith. I mean, they've got a really, really good offensive line. You've got Jonathan Taylor back there. We know what he can do when he's healthy. And for me, the offensive MVP is actually Michael Pittman Jr. I think the more that they leaned into Pittman as the year went on last year, the better they got. There was a stretch of games where it felt like he was getting 8, 10, 11 catches every single week. And honestly, he was. He had 109 catches last year, fourth in the league, 15 contested catches, which was also 4th in the league, and an 80 receiving grade that was a top 20 mark. Look, Pittman is the guy who makes us go. We're waiting on other guys to emerge, right? Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell. Like, I don't know who's going to emerge as that too. I'm sure they're hoping it's Mitchell with all the size and speed and everything he did at Texas, and they got, honestly, it was a steal in the second round. I think he easily could have been a late first-round pick, as talented as he is. I think he's a better route runner than people give him credit for, but that's besides the point. We know Pittman is the constant. He's going to show up every single week tough catches, all of that RPO stuff and all the motion and everything in Steichen's offense, it's really based around Pittman and where he wants to line him up and just how he wants to get him going both before and after the catch, right? But I need to see this overall to believe with Richardson. I need to see it in front of me. I need to see the accuracy and the footwork get better. I know he's going to be able to do the bootleg stuff. He's going to run. He's going to be fantasy players' favorite quarterback. And I don't blame them one bit for that just because of the way strategy and all that goes in fantasy. But I got to see him just find that consistency as a passer, right? Like, I just can't have – he's just been airmailing balls. Even in the preseason, there's some misses in there, man, and some easy ones that NFL quarterbacks don't miss. All the talent in the world, have to see it to believe it. With Richardson, Pittman is my offensive MVP.
Yeah, my offensive MVP is Anthony Richardson for that very reason, because everything in Indianapolis hinges on his ability to raise his floor, like we talked about a couple of minutes ago. He has just absolutely spectacular passes. I mean, even through this preseason, which I did not think that his preseason performance, it's not like it was all bad. So when I say that it was bad, it's not that I'm saying that it was void of any good plays, but I think that Richardson's preseason was bad because that's not what you wanted to see from him. I didn't really care about the spectacular throws this preseason. I already know that he can make those. Show me the footwork is improved. Show me the consistency is improved. Show me that the ball is going exactly where you want it to while you are in structure. The outside of structure stuff, throwing on the run, it feels like those no-look passes, the crossbody passes, the ability to have your feet pointed to the left and you somehow sling it to the right and it gets there on a frozen rope. Like, those passes are fantastic, but it's the in-between that makes a great NFL quarterback. And the in-between right now is an area of concern for Richardson. You got people in the chat saying this, and I agree with you. As a Florida Gator grad, I watched every single snap that Richardson played while he was at Florida. And that final year that he was there, no doubt about it, the accuracy and the consistency with where he delivered the ball and how he delivered the ball was an issue. Again, that doesn't mean that there weren't fantastic plays, but the play-by-play basis was an issue for him. I was encouraged last year. Well, one, because he got drafted in Indianapolis and I love Shane Steichen. But two, like, even in those early games before he went out for the season with that shoulder injury, you saw Shane Steichen sort of simplifying the offense a little bit for him. Half-field reads, like leveled concepts, like a sail concept where it's like, hey, you're just reading this defender. Read this one defender. If he does this, you throw it over top. If he goes deep, you throw it underneath. That's all you need to do. Get him in rhythm. And when he was doing that, I thought the footwork and the mechanics looked better last year. I thought I don't pretend to be a quarterback guru, but I thought they looked worse this year. When I saw him in the preseason, it looked like Florida Anthony Richardson. And that worries me if he was doing those things in practice, they would be helping him, correcting him, like repositioning his footwork, all that stuff. So that makes me think that he is able to do those things in practice. But then when the games and the live bullets start flying, he reverts back to kind of like who he was at Florida, which is a worry for me. So at this point in time, as the guy who I think the offense completely hinges on, I think the second half of this season is paramount for Anthony Richardson. One, he's got to make it there. He's got to be healthy. He has to get it to the second half of this season. We need a fully healthy year for him. Two, I think the preseason kind of hinted to me that he might struggle a little bit with those inconsistencies through the first 8 weeks of the year. What is he going to look like in the final 8 games of the year? Maybe this team makes the playoffs as a wild card. I'm not sure. But even if that's not the case, that doesn't really matter to me. Does he show true improvement in the second half of this season? Because if they do, and he does, I could be all in on the Colts when it comes to next year with another offseason of them getting better and adding to this roster. So that's my thoughts on Anthony Richardson as well. I do kind of see it a little bit similar to you with, man, we've got to see it from him. What about defensive MVP? Who do you have as the defensive MVP for this team?
I'm going with their best player, and their defensive line is getting a lot better, especially with young talent. But I'm going with a veteran guy they picked up a couple years ago who's just consistent every year, man, especially in the pass rush game. That's DeForest Buckner. I mean, he's been their best player for a while. 87.1 pass rush grade last year. The only 3 guys ahead of him among interior players. Dexter Lawrence, Aaron Donald, Chris Jones. And you're talking about two surefire Hall of Famers in Dexter Lawrence, who maybe is on his way there as well. DeForest Buckner with the interior pass rush, and even in the run game with all the problems that he causes inside, he gives the Colts a chance on that side of the ball. Obviously, they're waiting on younger guys like Kwity Paye and Leatu Latu and all the other guys around him to really develop into stars as well. But DeForest Buckner is the star of this defense, and to have a 3 technique like that, it's what every defensive coordinator dreams of in a 4-man front. They're like, can I get that 3 technique that just causes havoc all the time in both phases? The Aaron Donald, the Chris Joneses, the Warren Sapps of the world, those guys. DeForest Buckner is one of those guys. He was one of those guys in San Francisco in that loaded crew. The Colts went and got him to be that guy, and he's worth every penny they're paying him. He's still their best player and the biggest problem on their defensive line in their front 7. He's just, at times, he's unblockable still.
I think DeForest is fantastic. So I think that's a really good call out. I think Kwity Paye is also a pretty good call out. He had the most sacks of his NFL career in a single season last year, which is good. The passers win percentage was a little bit down for him, which is kind of what I'm getting into here with my MVP. I think if you're really talking about the guy that everything kind of hangs on, you are right, is DeForest Buckner. But I already think that Buckner's going to be a stud because we see it every single year. So I'm not worried about that part. The part of a player whose performance could really mean everything to this team on top of, or should I say around Buckner, is rookie Leatu Latu, their first-round pass rusher. I have him as their defensive MVP this year, not because I necessarily think he is going to be their best player, but because I truly think that he is their most valuable, because if he can step onto the field, which it looks like he is already, we've seen the practice reps, we've seen some things in the preseason, if that reflects what we saw at UCLA over the last 2 years, this Colts defense, I think, could be a lot better than people are giving it credit for. It's just not getting talked about a lot. Last season, the Colts were second in the league in total sacks. They had 53. They were second in the NFL in total sacks. And yet they were just 10th in passers win percentage, and they were only 28th in total pressure. So when they had the ability to bring the quarterback down, they were able to do so at a very high clip. But you want more regular pressure. You want to be able to get after the quarterback on a more regular basis. Nobody in all of college football over the last 2 years was better at that than Leatu Latu. He was first in the NCAA in total pressures over the last 2 years. He was first in passers win percentage. I don't think he was first in sacks, but those are the 2 numbers that you really want. Consistent pressure and a high passers win percentage. His presence, if he can continue to do that on the defensive line, that just makes it all the easier for guys like Kwity Paye, guys like DeForest Buckner. You got big, strong dudes like Grover Stewart, right? There's some players who are in reserve as well, like Adetomiwa Adebawore is somebody who comes to mind, right? The linebackers who could be coming free up the middle. It all gets so much easier if more attention than normal for a rookie has to be paid to Leatu Latu. And that's why I think that the value of what he could bring to this team could make all the difference in the world for their front 7 and their defense overall. So I've got him as their defensive MVP. What about a breakout player? Who you got there?
I'm going to stay on defense. I'm going to go to corner, which is a spot where the Colts have struggled in recent years. You talk about they have a consistent player in the slot in Kenny Moore, but they've really, really struggled at outside corner the last few years. And finding a young player who can fill that void, right, and can just give them something, even if it's not a Sauce Gardner or a Derek Stingley or somebody like that, something at outside corner, because the Colts, at that spot have really been rolling around the bottom 5 of the league the last couple of years. Give me Juju Brents, the second-year man out of Kansas State. I think when he was healthy last year, he showed some solid flashes in coverage. He has to play the whole season, so we do need to see that. But 64.5 coverage grade last year, and a lot of that is weighed down by that last game against Houston where the Texans really went at him. First play of the game, he had Nico Collins one-on-one and got torched on a post. But the rest of the year before that, he was really, really good. Actually, if you take out that last game, he had over a 70 coverage grade in his rookie year, which for a mid-round pick is pretty darn good, right? They need a guy like Brents to step up. And I think the one thing, too, for me, Colts are known as a heavy zone coverage team, but he had the highest man coverage grade on the team, among their corners at least, at 75.2. If they can mix it up a little more, maybe they have to lean into that with his skill set. His skill set might just be tilted more towards man coverage right now while he works on field awareness and things like that in zone. But I think Juju Brents is a guy who, A, needs to step up and certainly can step up for them at outside corner. It's a spot that's hurt them for a long time when they've had to cover the better receivers in the league. Take even that Texans game, the Nico Collins of the world, or when they play the Bills, the Stephon Diggs, or not the Bills anymore, the Texans again. boy, they just can't cover the Texans, can they? Stephon Diggs of the world, Nico Collins, but just number one receivers on the outside that they've had issues with, right? I'm so used to Diggs being in Buffalo now. We got to get used to the Texans being this loaded. But no, I mean, it's going to be a thing, right? We've talked about the Jags, even just in their division, the Jags and their vertical threats, the Texans and all their threats, and even Tennessee. Look, you still got a team, even though they're we think they're going to be in last place. Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins, that's a real problem to have to cover. And if you're not ready on the outside, you're going to have an issue. The Colts need to get better at corner, and they need a player like Juju Brents to step up.
I'll stick with the secondary with my breakout player. Maybe some people would say that he broke out already, which is fair, but I think that he could have the best year of his career yet. That's Julian Blackmon, their safety. This is somebody who played both corner and safety during his time in college when he was at Utah, and I've got high hopes for Julian Blackmon. Tore his ACL in 2021, was working back from that injury in 2022 when he was on the field. Last year in 2023, best coverage grade of his career at 72.6. The versatility, I think the high football IQ, it feels like he's always in the right place at the right time, and I was watching Kay Adams on the Up and Adams show. She was talking with Shane Steichen when they were at Colts camp, and she asked him, like, hey, who is somebody who not enough people are talking about, who you're excited to see on your own team this season? And very quickly he was like, Julian Blackmon. Like, he's having a phenomenal camp. He's exactly where he needs to be. It feels like at all times. He's like, they're setting the defense up kind of through him. And I think it could be, again, the best year yet for a player that I know some people, like I said, may have said is broken out already, but I think the best is yet to come for him. So I'm going to go with Blackmon there. What about the team's best rookie?
I'm rolling right back to your defensive MVP. It's Leatu Latu. I actually think
it's fair.
He's my pick to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think his play style. First of all, let's go back to the college thing. You talked about UCLA. Last year, the best overall grade by a Power 5 defensive player in PFF history, passing up guys like Chase Young and Quinnen Williams and Sauce, anybody, it doesn't matter. Whoever you think of has played the last 10, 11 years in college football, he's better than all of them. I just love the way, first of all, his pass rush arsenal is just crazy. It's nuts. The fact that there's so few guys, like you have guys who are comfortable in a stand-up role as an outside linebacker. You have guys who are comfortable in a three-point stance. For him, it doesn't matter. He's gone right to being in a three-point stance now after they really ran more of a 3-4 kind of thing at UCLA, and he was standing up. Now he's gone to a three-point stance. Doesn't matter. Just made the adjustment. He looks great already. And I just, even in run defense, Trev, it's the way that his eyes are married to his feet. Like it sounds like something. Well, duh, your whole body's connected. Everything should work all at once, right? But like, it's only certain defensive players who their eyes just take their body where it needs to go, if that makes sense. You know, you can see it a little easier with a linebacker, but his awareness off of the edge, when you can always see his helmet's on the right side of the offensive lineman's shoulder pads, telling him where to go. Then his hands rip, then his feet go. Everything's always in sync, and he's so heady, and he's always studying the game. And I know the one concern with him coming out of UCLA was, well, he might not be the athlete like Dallas Turner or Jared Verse or Chop Robinson is, right? He's like a B to B plus athlete. But what he does to make up for it is he studies the game. He studies his pass rush arsenal. He works on that. I remember being at his presser at the combine, and somebody asked him, like, well, what are the things you're working on? Have you been working on the 40? Have you been working on the vert or whatever? And he goes, no, I've been working on secondary run defense counters. I've been working on hand moves to shed blocks in run defense. I'm like, he doesn't care about that stuff.
Because he doesn't have it. He doesn't have to work on anything pass rush wise. Like, he's already got it. Right. He's good.
And even then, he still does. He's one of those freaks. Like, I think we've heard T.J. Watt talk about this, how it's just this constant level of, even though he's already great, I'm still improving. And this is a guy who's been through so much, right? Darn near medically retired with the neck injury back when he was at Washington, and then went to UCLA and resurrected his career. Like, been through so much, mentally is all the way there. I think he is on his way to greatness. I think he's going to be the best defensive player to come out of this draft. He was clearly the best defensive player in this draft. If you just throw on the tape as opposed to the combine and all that stuff, it wasn't even close. I think he's an elite pass rusher. He's going to be a really good run defender. He's my pick to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he's going to be spectacular.
Yeah, he is mine as well. I echo everything that you say about Latu. Obviously, I talked about him as a defensive MVP for this team. My best rookie, if I can't say Latu, which I would, but I've already talked about him, A.D. Mitchell, my boy A.D. Mitchell, right? Should have been a first-round wide receiver. Plain and simple. He's good enough to it. He's got the tape for it. He had the tape at Georgia. He had the tape at Texas. Should have been a first-round wide receiver. And I think that the Colts got an absolute steal getting him where they did in the middle of the second round there. And I believe that he completes this wide receiver room. You got Michael Pittman Jr., you got A.D. Mitchell, you got Josh Downs. Like, that is a fantastic trio of wide receivers. Is it the best wide receiver trio in the NFL right now? Okay, no, we don't have to say that. But it has the potential to be one of the best, in the years to come. I think that there's those three players basically allow you to attack defenses however you would want. From the slot with short area quickness and choice routes, from vertical ability when it comes to A.D. Mitchell. You can leave him off the line of scrimmage as a flanker. You have him as a pre-snap motion player. You can hand the ball off to him in motion behind the line of scrimmage. You've got Michael Pittman Jr. who could play as an X, who could be strong on the line of scrimmage as well, be a really good run blocker for you, be a contested catch guy, be a short yardage guy, a red zone guy. Like you could fill a lot of the needs that you would want to have from a receiving core with those three guys. So I think A.D. Mitchell, his athleticism, his big playability, and his red zone success, I think is something that is really huge to add to this team. So I will go with A.D. Mitchell being a reason why Anthony Richardson could take a big step forward if he indeed does that. Last team we're talking about is the Tennessee Titans. Both of us have them missing the playoffs. I have them at 5-12. You have them at 4-13. Talk to me about the Titans, and then give me an offensive MVP for this team.
Yeah, the 4-13 I don't feel great about, just because I think they are better than that. It's just the way the wins and losses kind of shook out when we went through the playoff predictor and put this together. But I think they could be closer to 6 or 7. They brought in a lot of veteran talent, right? Tony Pollard, Lloyd Cushenberry. They just traded for Ernest Jones, which is a really good add for them at linebacker. They built up the trenches in the rookie class with J.C. Latham and Tavondre Sweat. They traded for L'Jarius Sneed. I'll admit they're probably better than a 4-win team. Don't take me too much to the cleaners on that one, because it's probably going to be closer to 6 or 7. I do think they're a competitive team. They're not going to be, like the worst team in football or anything. They're not going to be the number 1 overall pick. I don't think they just have too many good veteran players to be the worst team in football, right? But I do think it's hard to find the ceiling on this team unless Will Levis gets significantly better, right? And you've got a guy who had the highest average depth of target in the NFL by almost 2 yards. I believe C.J. Stroud was actually second on that list.
Wait, Levis did? I didn't even realize that.
He had the highest ADOT by almost two whole yards, which honestly suits him, because he was kind of, when he was on at Kentucky, he was kind of the same way. Will Levis is a vertical passer. He wants to throw the ball beyond the chains. No, on every single play. There isn't many checkdowns going with Will Levis, right? And I think we saw that in his first game against Atlanta, just ripping the ball down the field. The problem is, what can come with that is a high variance level of play, right? We used to talk about this sort of thing with Josh Allen. Look, really good athlete, really good runner, big runner, 225, 230 pounds. He'll run right through you. This guy, Will Levis, is a football player for sure, but he's got to get more consistent down to down. There's too much high variance in his game. One guy, though, who kind of fits his skill set, who they brought in, who I think will be the offensive MVP, is Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley had a decent season. Okay. Decent season last year, I believe 1,000-yard season, but maybe we just have to admit that Ridley's not on that level of Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill or one of those guys. There was a track for that before he got suspended, but probably not going to happen now. But he's still a good target for this team to have. A 92.2 receiving grade on 10-plus yard targets last year. He can win downfield, right? And I think it fits with Levis if you're going to buy into it. If you're Brian Callahan. I was thinking of Bill. I had to think of his name. Brian Callahan. If you're Brian
They're
Callahan.
They're both there, so I mean, technically, you could have gotten away with it.
They're both there. I was stuck on Bill Callahan. I was like, what's it? It's Brian, right? Brian Callahan, who I saw speak at the Combine also. And I think he said a couple of things he's looking for in his quarterbacks, just accuracy and timing and some of those fundamental things, right? And Levis has to work on some of those fundamental things. Down the field, he can rip the ball down the field as well as anybody, right? And he does have to get more consistent underneath, but they're building this offense around him. They're trying to build this running game. You've got J.C. Latham in there. You got Peter Skoronski in year 2. You got Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. That's a good duo, even though you lost Derrick Henry. I think it's going to be run the ball. It's going to be play action. It's going to be throwing the ball well down the field, and I think Calvin Ridley helps with that. I'll take him as my offensive MVP.
Yeah, I'll touch on Levis really quick first. I didn't know that about the average depth of target. That's actually hilarious, but it's very on brand for also why you draft Will Levis, right? For the big arm, that's what you want to do. You want to be able to unlock that. When you talk about the receivers that you have now, it's a lot of veteran guys, okay, but DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Traylon Burks, these guys got to be able to win vertically deep down the field, because very clearly that's how Will Levis plays, and I think that's what they're going to want to do. So the part about Levis that I think really needs to improve, along with the natural, hey, more big time throws, less turnover worthy plays, because he was about even last year in the 8 games that he played. 30 sacks taken in 8 games from Will Levis. That was 24th in the NFL, and he only played 8 games. Most of these other guys are playing 16, 17 games that are ahead of him. So sacks per game, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but 30 sacks in just 8 games is something that, and the offensive line in Tennessee is a major question mark, and why I only have them around 5 or 6 wins this season. But just overall, Levis has to play and better and be able to escape that pressure and not take as many sacks himself. So that's a big part of his game that needs to mature, I think, for this season, for them to make sure that they say, hey, even though this isn't going to be the best year in the record books, we're sticking with Will going into next year, moving forward. He could be hopefully their franchise guy. But Calvin Ridley, I agree, is the offensive MVP for this team. Really needs to step up. I think he needs to be the wide receiver 1, certainly with DeAndre Hopkins' status to start the year up in the air a little bit. But when you look at Ridley, I thought he had a solid year last year with the Jags, and I think it was a really good building block type of a season for him. He had a 76.5 grade in the preseason this year, which was the highest amongst the receivers for the Titans. Barely got over 1,000 yards last year, 72.2 receiving grade. I think there's more in the tank for Ridley to be an even better player for the Titans, and I think he'd be a focal point. And honestly, I think he could be wide receiver 1 for that group. So I think him emerging to that spot does mean a lot for this overall wide receiver room. What about defensive MVP? I think we got a lot of choices here for Tennessee, but who are you going with?
There's a lot of choices. They brought in some really good veteran players, but I'm going to go with a mainstay, and I think a mainstay that needs a bounce-back year, and that's Jeffrey Simmons up front. When we've seen the Titans be good in the past, he's really been the engine of their defensive line and their front 7. Look, and there's some other good guys they brought in around him. You drafted Tavondre Sweat to play right next to him, which there may not be a bigger pair of guys on the interior in all of football. They just traded for Ernest Jones to help at linebacker, but it all centers around Simmons. And his overall grade last year dropped from 81.1 to 68.4. He was dealing with injuries. He was playing through some injuries. His run defense especially was the part where you could really see him struggle. Still a good pass rusher, but the big thing is we're used to seeing this Titans team be really good in run defense. 2021 and 2022, they were top 10 in run defense grade. Last year, they dropped into the bottom 10. And I think a big part of that is Simmons dealing with his injuries and trying to play through them and trying to gut it out. And I fully respect that. Any guy who's out there playing hurt, and they're almost all playing hurt by the end of the season, I respect the hell out of that. But Simmons has to be that guy, right? I think there are times where we've seen him be among those elite defensive tackles, those top 10 defensive tackles that are really big-time difference makers, all the potential in the world. And, you know, I just think if he can be the centerpiece, right, everything else can fall in line. They're not great off the edge. You got Harold Landry out there who's solid in spurts. You've got Tavondre Sweat inside who's going to be more of a run stopper than a pass rusher. Although he had a good pass rush year at Texas last year, they're really trying to figure things out in this front 7. But if Jeffrey Simmons can get back to being the one constant star player, the star disruptor in the middle, that's a guy that can make their defense a hell of a lot better if he has a bounce back.
I'm going to say L'Jarius Sneed. I think that Sneed was a huge addition for this team. I think that he gives them a true CB1 like we have seen him be in Kansas City throughout their Super Bowl runs. He's somebody who I think can play inside and out. He can play man coverage. He can play zone coverage. Like this is a major part of their secondary that I think was missing. And I did not have the Titans as my favorite to land L'Jarius Sneed. And even when the news came that they were trading him to Tennessee, I was like, okay, I kind of thought Tennessee was a little bit more in like, let's rebuild here. Let's get a little bit younger. But then, you know, they had a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. They had a guy like L'Jarius Sneed. They had Calvin Ridley in free agency. And it's like, all right, I guess, you know, like we're staying and remaining competitive as we can, getting these veterans in here. And I think Sneed is going to be a big portion of this. You mentioned Simmons. I think he's a big part of their plans. Harold Landry obviously needs to continue to be good for them on the edge, which I think he will. But again, it is Sneed's versatility, his veteran presence for I guess it's not the youngest cornerback group now. Roger McCreary's a little bit older now, but I think the ceiling that Sneed brings them and his experience playing at the very highest level is going to be great, not only for their defensive scheme overall, but also for the rest of the cornerback room, for him to sort of lead by example, which I think is going to be big for them, and Chidobe Awuzie as well, along with McCreary. So I think the addition of Snead's going to be big. What about a breakout player? Who you got as the Titans breakout player?
So, trenches are a big theme for me with this team, and I'm going to last year's 11th overall pick in Peter Skoronski. Look, I watched this tape every week last year, and I think you just saw a guy that had to adjust to a new position, right? Playing left guard. I know there's a whole thing about the short arms and lack of length and all of that stuff, but he had never taken a snap at guard in college, right? And he's a guy, I think he got better, especially in pass protection as the year went on. I think year 2 for Skoronski is going to be big. I think, look, he's a fantastic player. He's a talented player. Personally, I thought you could have given him a shot at tackle. I know the short arms thing is a problem. I like with how good before Joe Alt, Notre Dame, and everything this year. Peter Skoronski was that guy at left tackle in college football at Northwestern. He was just so good, especially in pass protection, a good run blocker. Like, I know there's certain times physical traits take over in the evaluation, but with him, he's just such a good football player. But I think that level of talent and that level of just being that good a football player is going to help him at guard. And honestly, Trev, have you seen some of the double teams him and Latham are throwing at people in the preseason?
Yeah, that's the dream, right?
I mean, man, oh man, and then you think about what he's surrounded with last year. So often guys on the offensive line has to be such a cohesive unit where it's like if you don't have those guys around you that can help you and call things out and adjust the stunts and do all that stuff, well, yeah, you're going to look worse in the grading, and your entire team's going to look worse in the grading. Now you go from what they had last year to J.C. Latham to his left, and Lloyd Cushenberry, a top 10 center, to his right. I think it's a big-time situation. We're all talking about Latham and some of the veteran additions, but I think Skoronski's environment is way better. I think second year at the position, he's super smart. He's athletic. He's still a good pass protector, even at guard, even though he's kind of might be a little bit smaller of a guard than some of your traditional guys that we've seen. But Skoronski, I think he's in for the breakout. And he was still last year, if you want to run those big power runs and get those double teams going, 16th among all guards in gap run block grade. So, and honestly, the Bengals with Brian Callahan last year, they ran a good amount of gap runs. Sometimes they just get in a duo and they come straight at you. So if Latham and Skoronski, I think that might be the biggest X factor for this whole offense, even beyond Will Levis. Those two guys on the left side gelling the way that we've seen in flashes in the preseason is big for them. That could legitimately, those two guys win them more games if they get in sync. And then with Cushenberry at center, that's a big-time base for them on the offensive line. I think they're doing a really good job building that, and I think Skoronski's in for a big year.
Yeah, for conversation's sake, I'll just kind of piggyback off of that with my best rookie. I'll name J.C. Latham as my best rookie here for the Tennessee Titans. I'll bounce back and say my breakout player in a second, but I agree. It might be a little bit of a transition, as it is for most young rookie offensive tackles in the NFL, to go up against NFL-style edge rushers, especially some good ones that we know the Titans are going to face this season. But I have a lot of faith in Bill Callahan as the offensive line coach there in Tennessee to get the most out of Latham and put him on a really great trajectory, not just to have a good rookie season, but to unlock what could be a potential Pro Bowl player for them. So that left side of the offensive line, I'm very excited about for the Tennessee Titans. My breakout player, though, I'll bounce back to that. I'm going to go running back Tajay Spears, right? I think that losing a major player like Derrick Henry when it comes to the identity of your football team is a really big deal. They bring in Tony Pollard in free agency, so I think that Pollard is going to have a little bit better of a year than he did last year in Dallas. But Spears, I'm very intrigued in because I don't think it's just going to be a workhorse event with Tony Pollard there. I think that it is really going to be by committee, and I think it's because of what Tajay Spears showed us last year that could be the case. 0.26 missed tackles forced per attempt and 4.5 yards per carry were the best on the team in 2023, better than Derrick Henry. Now, obviously, Derrick Henry had a lot more volume, so, per attempt stats, they matter when you have a lot less volume and you can perform a little bit better. Maybe you're in more advantageous situations. But still, I wanted to shout that out as a big-time compliment for Spears and how well he played last year. 13 explosive runs on just 101 attempts last year as well. So, Tajay Spears is somebody who I'm really looking forward to seeing.
Yeah.
Did you have something else on Spears or Latham or whoever? Because I kind of bounced around there.
Latham is also my best rookie. I thought about Tavondre Sweat in this spot, but I think Latham, the big role that he's going to have and the possibility that left side could have a breakout, I think Latham has to be a big part of that. And on Spears too, I love what he does in the passing game, man. I loved him coming out of Tulane. I just thought he had a really dynamic skill set. I think you're right. I think Spears and Pollard running behind guys like Latham and Skoronski, that's going to be the base of this offense. I don't think you want Will Levis dropping dropping back and throwing it 45 times a game. You don't. And I think Will Levis, even back at Kentucky, operated better with play-action shots. When they had the run game going, I remember they had Chris Rodriguez down there. They had some good receivers. The year, I believe it was 2021, I think it was, that they had a really good supporting cast at Kentucky, and he just teed off because they could run the ball, they could take play-action shots, they were balanced. This is the type of team that Brian Callahan's trying to build, right? But I think, yeah, for me, Latham's the best rookie also. I think maybe it takes some time to adjust mentally, some of the assignments. I think I see some things in the preseason where I go, okay, he's still adjusting to some of the schemes and learning the playbook and doing all that, but physically he's got everything you could want in a tackle, right? And I think it's a great call-out on Spears. It's a great call-out with Pollard. I think you have two good backs there. I know they're not riding Derrick Henry because he's not there anymore, but I think these two backs can make this a successful running game anyway, and even, two dynamic backs that can both help you in the passing game.
Go back to Will Levis. We got Ryan and Roddy in the chat saying that the Titans offense should look a little bit different than it was last year, obviously with the change of Brian Callahan now being there, bringing his offense over. Ryan says it's not going to be that many downfield passes. Roddy is saying that the game plan is going to be a little bit close to what we saw like with Jake Browning when he was in last year when Burrow got hurt. So maybe that's the case. And that'd be interesting to see for Will Levis if that is different, if they're not going to throw the ball as much deep down the field, because it's just like you said, like a lot of Will Levis's best plays when he was at Kentucky was a lot of those deep shots. And if it's maybe less of that, perhaps it rounds out his game a little bit more. So maybe that could be a maturing element of Will Levis's game to make him a more complete quarterback.
One thing I like that Callahan did with Browning was get him on the move, and there was a decent amount of bootleg too in Kentucky's passing game back when Levis was there. I think maybe a theme that you'll see then more is Levis in the bootleg game, right? When you talk about rolling out, taking that space. You mentioned with Anthony Richardson about half-field reads. Well, those bootlegs create half-field reads for a guy like Levis too, who sometimes he's going to get into his first read and then he's going to take off and run, but the bootleg is going to do that. So that's a big thing. I think to me, we're seeing it with the Bears a little bit as well, where maybe we can run off this left side and just get behind J.C. Latham and hammer people. Then we run a boot with Levis rolling to his right, and you got a big problem now. With all that space, we know Levis can run. He can run you right over, and maybe even take deep shots on the bootleg too. So I think maybe you see something. I think with Browning, that's what I saw, is they kind of got back to basics. We're going to run it, and we're going to run bootleg, and then when we have to drop back, we will. But that's going to be the foundation of the offense. I think that's actually a really, really good call. But anything where you can get Will Levis to use his feet and his arm at the same time and have that dual threat going, I think really helps Tennessee.
All right, there we go. Up and down the AFC South there. I only had the Houston Texans making the playoffs. You had the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars making the playoffs, but that is how we saw that division. We got one division left this week in the AFC. It is the AFC West. We'll tell you what we think about the Kansas City Chiefs and if there is any threat behind them in this division to maybe play surprise team, spoiler, perhaps even make the playoffs, maybe even unseed the Chiefs at the top. Okay, maybe not. I don't even think I honestly say that as a teaser for the next episode. But we'll tell you guys what we think about the AFC West and the details that go for every single team within it. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Dalton Wasserman. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the PFF NFL show. See you guys tomorrow.